So this 79-year-old was driving through the chaotic symphony of Lagos traffic along Zainab Bello Way. But suddenly, a speeding pickup truck defied a red light and slammed into his Prado with a force that just switched the world off. He survived, but his spine did not. From the waist down, his body became a memory, a country he could no longer visit. The doctors spoke in careful, polished sentences, but the message was brutal.
I'm really sorry, Mr. Harrington.
He would never walk again. For a man who had built an empire standing tall in boardrooms and government halls, this was a quiet death disguised as survival. Chief Harrington had 3 people who answered to the name of family. His first son, Adebayo, was 55, a man whose voice was always too loud.
Hello! Can you hear me?
His entitlement a heavy cloak, his patience a currency he never carried.
Papa had a bad accident. Find me at the hospital. Hello!
His daughter, Folake, 52, was all polished elegance on the outside, but underneath she was as cold and hard as marble. And then there was his grandson, Kunle.
But mommy,
barely 30.
I said I don't get any money for transport. You need to pick me up now.
He called himself a businessman, but his only business had been withdrawing from his grandfather's bank account. When the accident was fresh, when sympathy was still a valuable social currency, they came around. In that first month, their visits were frequent, their faces etched with practiced concern.
Take good care, Papa. I will see you next week.
By the second month, the visits grew shorter, like shadows shrinking at noon. By the third month, they stopped. Excuses became the new currency. The traffic is terrible. Work is overwhelming. I'll call you back. The calls went unanswered. On his 80th birthday, a milestone that should have been a celebration of a life well lived, Chief Harrington sat alone in his sprawling Ikoyi mansion. He stared at a phone that refused to ring. The silence a deafening confirmation of a terrible truth. The love he thought he had purchased with a lifetime of wealth had expired the moment he became a burden. In a small notebook found later beside his bed, he had written a single, devastating sentence. The day I became weak was the day my children disappeared. By December, his lawyer, a man who dealt in contracts and consequences, arranged for a housemaid. Her name was Bello Zainab, 33, from Ilorin, a woman whose quiet respect and gentle nature seemed to come from a different world entirely. She had once studied nursing, a dream she'd set aside to care for her ailing mother. When her mother passed, she never went back. Ambition had been replaced by a deep, innate sense of care. She cooked well, she spoke softly, and she moved with a humility that made no noise. On her first day, Zainab found Chief Harrington in his wheelchair by the window, his gaze fixed on the Lagos skyline as if he were already a ghost looking back at his own life. He didn't greet her. He didn't even acknowledge her.
Good morning, Chief Harrington.
He had given up on people. But Zainab didn't push. She cleaned the house with quiet efficiency, arranged his things with a gentle touch, and waited. Hours later, when the afternoon light softened, she asked him a single question, her voice soft but steady. If your leg still worked, sir, what would you cook for yourself? The question startled him. It was a pebble thrown into the still stagnant waters of his despair. No one had asked him what he wanted in months. He turned his chair slowly, his eyes focusing on her for the first time. Egusi soup, he said, his voice rusty from disuse. My late wife's recipe. Thick. No shortcuts. 2 days later, Zainab made it for him. She had lowered a section of the kitchen counter so he could help from his wheelchair. She let him taste the simmering pot, let him complain about the seasoning, let him correct her technique. As they ate together, tears, hot and unexpected, streamed down his weathered face. For the first time since the world went dark, he felt alive. Time passed, and in the quiet spaces of the grand mansion, something gentle began to grow. It wasn't rushed or loud. It was built from long conversations that filled the silent rooms. They talked about Lagos before the third mainland bridge, about regrets that haunt the midnight hour, about faith, about the crushing weight of loneliness, and about dreams that die without a sound. Zainab never crossed a line. She never asked for money or favors. She never touched what wasn't hers. She just cooked, cleaned, listened, and cared. She played old high-life music from his youth during his painful physical therapy sessions. She read the newspapers aloud to him every morning. She would wheel him outside onto the veranda so that neighbors would greet him as Chief, not as a man trapped in a chair. Slowly, the sound of his laughter, deep and genuine, returned to the house. One evening, he asked her, "Why? Why are you so kind to a broken old man? Zainab answered without a moment's hesitation. Because nobody deserves to disappear while they are still alive. And in that moment, love entered the room. It was quiet. It was unexpected. It was impossible. They never named it. They never announced it. It lived in the shared silences, in the easy laughter, in the simple way she would adjust his blanket just before he felt the evening chill. It was an affection built on presence, not passion, on care, not desire. His children, however, finally noticed the change, not because their father looked happier, but because his attention, his pining, was no longer waiting for them. Adebayo, the loud son, finally visited after 8 long months. He walked in to find his father and the maid sitting together, sharing a story, their laughter echoing in the hall. Something ugly and venomous rose in him. He accused her of being a manipulative gold digger, of having an agenda. He spat out insults about her tribe, accusing her of wanting what did not belong to her. For the first time in years, Chief Harrington's anger exploded like a dormant volcano. "Where were you?" he roared, his voice shaking with a righteous fury. "Where were all of you when I couldn't sleep from the pain, when I couldn't move my own legs, when I had nothing left to offer you?" He pointed a trembling finger at the door. Zainab was the only one who stayed. Bayo left, his face a mask of fury. That night the phone calls started, whispers of concern that were thinly veiled threats. Accusations spun from thin air, suspicions fueled by a toxic mix of greed and tribal prejudice. They consulted lawyers. They demanded mental evaluations. They tried to paint him as a senile old man being manipulated by a cunning outsider. But nothing worked. Chief Harrington was clear, sharp, and resolute. In March, he quietly changed his will. The bulk of his vast estate, the mansion, the savings, the assets, was to go to Zainab Bello. He added a single ironclad clause. If any family member was found to be involved in harming or intimidating her in any way, they would forfeit their inheritance entirely. He signed the documents with a calm, unshakable certainty. Zainab never knew. All she knew was that the atmosphere in the house had grown heavier, the glares from his children colder, the hostility a constant, lingering presence in the air. One Thursday evening, as the sun sank in a blaze of orange and purple behind the Lagos skyline, she wheeled Chief Harrington onto the balcony. They talked and laughed, two souls finding refuge in each other's company. She leaned down from his back and whispered in his ear, saying, "I'm so happy I managed to bring a smile back to your face, after all that you have been through, Chief Harrington." A small moment of warmth in a world that was rapidly about to turn cruel. Later that night, she left to go to the local market. But she never returned. Her body was found days later. The city whispered. The family issued flat denials. Money, as it often does, moved quietly behind closed doors.
Job well done, boys.
Silencing questions and erasing truths. Chief Harrington stopped speaking. He stopped eating. He stopped hoping. On the morning he died, the attending nurse said he whispered one final sentence before his heart gave out. "I waited a lifetime to be loved, and my children could not allow it. Because Zainab died before him, the inheritance meant for her could not be claimed. But because the courts, after a lengthy investigation, found proof that his children were involved in a conspiracy of threats and intimidation against her, the final clause of his will was triggered. They not only missed out on the house, the money, and the legacy, but instead, they all ended up behind bars for Zainab's murder. Every last naira went to charity. Bello Zainab was buried quietly without headlines or monuments. She was just a woman who stayed when staying meant everything. And the city of Lagos, in all its relentless energy, moved on, as if a great and tragic love had never lived in that house at all. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing to Mike J. Edutainments for more tales from the shadows. We upload 2 to 3 stories every week on YouTube and TikTok. My best recommendation to watch next is this one right here. Stay safe out there.